You sit in meditation for the 100th time, eyes closed, breath slow, desperately trying to activate that mysterious third eye everyone talks about. You've read the articles, watched the videos, tried the crystals and the specific frequencies, but nothing happens. Just silence. Just you, alone in the dark behind your eyelids, wondering if you're broken, if you're doing it wrong, if maybe this whole pineal gland activation thing is just another spiritual fantasy sold to seekers who'll never find what they're looking for. And then the doubt creeps in, that familiar voice that says you're not spiritual enough, not pure enough, that your pineal gland is too calcified from years of fluoride and processed food and modern living. You feel the weight of it, this sense that the gateway to higher consciousness exists inside your own skull, but you can't find the key. Carl Jung knew something about this gateway that almost no one talks about. He understood that the pineal gland, what he called the seat of the soul, isn't activated through techniques or rituals or external practices. It's activated through a psychological process so profound that it literally changes the chemistry of your brain. And what I'm about to share with you will completely transform how you understand spiritual awakening, because Jung discovered that the pineal gland responds not to what you do, but to what you become. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why your attempts haven't worked and what actually needs to happen for this ancient gland to open its secrets to you. Jung spent decades studying alchemy, mysticism, and the hidden wisdom traditions of the world, and he found something remarkable. Every tradition that spoke of the third eye, the inner vision, the seat of the soul, they were all pointing to the same psychological transformation. The pineal gland, this tiny pine cone-shaped organ buried deep in the center of your brain, has been called the third eye for thousands of years, across cultures that never contacted each other. The ancient Egyptians knew about it. The Hindus knew about it. The mystery schools of Greece knew about it. And Jung realized they all understood something we've forgotten. This gland doesn't just produce melatonin and regulate your sleep cycles. It's a translator between dimensions of reality. But here's what Jung discovered that changes everything. You can't force it open. You can't trick it or manipulate it or activate it through sheer willpower. The pineal gland responds to a specific psychological state, and that state only emerges through what Jung called the individuation process. This is the journey of becoming whole, of integrating the rejected and denied parts of yourself, of facing the shadow and embracing the paradox of your own existence. When this process reaches a critical threshold, the pineal gland doesn't just activate, it awakens, and the difference between those two words is everything. Most people approach spiritual awakening like they approach everything else in life. They want a technique, a method, a step-by-step process that guarantees results. Do this breathing exercise for 20 minutes a day. Avoid these foods. Take these supplements. Meditate at this specific time. And listen, there's nothing wrong with any of those practices. But Jung understood that they're addressing the symptom, not the cause. Your pineal gland isn't dormant because of fluoride or calcification or poor lifestyle choices. Those things might affect its physical functioning, yes, but the real blockage is psychological. The real calcification is in your psyche. You've spent your entire life building a personality, a persona, a mask you show to the world. You've decided who you are and who you're not. You've pushed certain thoughts and feelings and desires into the basement of your consciousness because they didn't fit the image you needed to maintain. Jung called this rejected material the shadow, and he said something that most spiritual seekers don't want to hear. The shadow must be integrated before the third eye can truly open, because the pineal gland, the seat of the soul, only activates when the personality becomes transparent to the self. When you stop lying to yourself about who you are, think about it. What is the third eye supposed to do? It's supposed to let you see reality as it actually is, beyond the illusions and projections and mental constructs you've built. But how can an organ of truth function in a psyche built on self-deception? This is the paradox Jung understood. You want to see clearly, but you've spent your whole life avoiding what you don't want to see. You want higher consciousness, but you haven't even faced your own unconscious. You want to activate the pineal gland, but you're terrified of what it might show you. Because here's the thing about true vision, real spiritual sight. It doesn't just show you the beautiful mystical realms and the angels and the higher dimensions. It shows you yourself. All of yourself, the parts you're proud of and the parts you've hidden, the light and the shadow, the divine and the animal. And most people aren't ready for that level of honesty. Jung studied the alchemists obsessively because he realized they weren't actually talking about turning lead into gold. They were describing a psychological transformation, a process of refining the soul until it becomes pure enough to reflect the divine light. And at the center of all alchemical imagery, you find symbols of the pineal gland, the pine cone, the single eye, the stone that isn't a stone. The alchemists knew that this transformation required descending into darkness before you could ascend into light. They called it the nagredo, the blackening, the death of the false self. You have to die before you can be reborn. You have to face the shadow before you can see the light. And in that confrontation with everything you've denied and rejected and pushed away, something miraculous happens. The psychic energy that was locked up in repression, in maintaining the false personality, that energy gets released, and it floods upward. It rises through what the Eastern traditions call the chakras, what Jung understood as levels of psychological development. And when it reaches the center of the brain, when it touches that ancient gland, something ignites. But let me be clear about what this feels like, because the spiritual marketplace has sold you a fantasy. They tell you that pineal gland activation is all bliss and cosmic consciousness and seeing auras and astral traveling. And sure, those experiences can happen, but the real activation, the one Jung was pointing to, it's often terrifying. Because when the pineal gland truly wakes up, you start seeing things you can't unsee. You see the lies you've been telling yourself. You see the patterns you've been repeating. You see how much of your life has been lived in a trance, sleepwalking through decades, pretending you're awake. You see other people's shadows, their hidden motivations, their unspoken pain. You see through the social games and the cultural conditioning and the collective illusions we all agree to believe in. And that level of sight, it's lonely, it's isolating. It's the burden every mystic and prophet and awakened soul has carried throughout history. The burden of seeing clearly in a world that prefers comfortable blindness. Jung had a phrase for this. He called it the transcendent function. It's the psyche's ability to hold opposites in tension until a third thing emerges, something new that transcends the original conflict. And the pineal gland is the biological anchor for this function. When you can hold the tension between your conscious ego and your unconscious shadow, between your spiritual aspirations and your earthly nature, between who you think you should be and who you actually are, that tension generates tremendous psychic energy. And that energy needs somewhere to go. It needs a focal point, a transformer, a translator. That's what the pineal gland does. It takes the raw psychological energy of individuation and converts it into spiritual perception. It opens the inner eye, but only when the personality has become strong enough and flexible enough to handle what that eye will see. Here's what nobody tells you about shadow work and pineal gland activation. They're not separate processes. You're not supposed to do shadow work first, get all cleaned up and perfect, and then activate your third eye. The activation happens through the shadow work. Every time you face something in yourself you've been avoiding, every time you admit a truth you didn't want to admit, every time you integrate a rejected piece of your psyche, you're activating the pineal gland. You're sending a surge of libido, of life energy, up through the center of your being. And over time, with repeated integration, that gland begins to function differently. It starts producing different chemicals. It starts receiving different frequencies. It starts translating not just physical light through your eyes, but psychological and spiritual light through your soul. Jung wrote about a patient who came to him completely blocked, unable to move forward in life, stuck in patterns of anxiety and depression that nothing seemed to help. And through their analytical work together, Jung guided this person into confronting the shadow material they'd been avoiding. Dreams of violence and sexuality and power that horrified them. Fantasies and desires that contradicted everything they believed about themselves. And as they slowly, carefully, courageously integrated this material, something shifted. The patient started having spontaneous visions, not drug-induced, not meditation-induced, just spontaneous openings of inner sight. They would be walking down the street and suddenly see the symbolic meaning behind everyday events. They would look at a person and immediately understand the unconscious drama playing out in that person's psyche. Their dreams became vivid, prophetic, numinous. And Jung explained it like this: by withdrawing the projections, by taking back the disowned parts of the psyche, the patient had freed up so much energy that the inner organs of perception naturally awakened. The pineal gland responded to psychological wholeness with expanded consciousness. Think about how much energy you spend maintaining your psychological defenses, pretending you don't feel what you feel, avoiding people and situations that might trigger your shadow, projecting your darkness onto others so you can keep believing you're only light, performing the personality you think you're supposed to have. All of that requires energy. Constant, exhausting energy. And where does that energy come from? From the same source that could be fueling your spiritual awakening. You're using the energy of consciousness to keep yourself unconscious. You're using the power of the third eye to keep the third eye closed. Because if it opened, if you really saw yourself, you'd have to change. You'd have to grow. You'd have to let the false self die. And that death feels like real death. It feels like annihilation. Every fiber of your ego screams against it. But Jung discovered something the ancient mystics knew. On the other side of that death, there's resurrection. Not metaphorical, not symbolic, but a real psychological rebirth that has physical and spiritual manifestations. When the ego dies to its limited self-concept and the self emerges, when the conscious mind surrenders to the unconscious depths, and the individuation process reaches critical mass, the pineal gland floods the brain with DMT. Your own body produces the spirit molecule, not because you took a drug or went to a ceremony or followed a technique, because your psyche has reached a level of integration that your biology responds to it. Your body knows when you've died and been reborn. It marks the occasion with chemistry. Now pause for a moment and really sit with this question. When was the last time you truly faced something in yourself that terrified you? Not just acknowledged it, not just thought about it, but actually felt it, integrated it, let it change who you believe you are. Because that's the work. That's what activates the pineal gland. And I want you to do something right now. In the comments below, I want you to write these exact words. I am ready to see what I've been avoiding. Just that simple phrase. Because when you declare that intention publicly, when you put it out into the universe through this small act, you're signaling to your unconscious that you're serious. You're ready for the real work of awakening. And trust me, when other people read your comment, when they see that you're brave enough to admit you've been avoiding parts of yourself, it gives them permission to do the same. This community, we're all walking this path together. We're all facing our shadows so we can activate our light. So write it in the comments. I am ready to see what I've been avoiding. Do it now, and then let's continue this journey together. The reason traditional techniques for pineal gland activation don't work for most people is because they're trying to go straight to the destination without making the journey. It's like trying to get a PhD without going through elementary school. The pineal gland activation that matters, the kind Jung was describing, it's not a party trick. It's not about seeing colors or having visions or proving to yourself that you're spiritual. It's about becoming conscious, fully conscious. Conscious of your motivations and your patterns and your shadow and your light. Conscious of how you create your own suffering. Conscious of how you've been asleep your whole life, dreaming that you're awake. And that level of consciousness, it can only emerge through the hard work of individuation, through confronting the parts of yourself you've exiled, through feeling the feelings you've numbed, through admitting the truths you've denied. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper and integrate your shadows and light, check out the Sim Method ebook. It's a concise guide that can help you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. Jung talked about a concept he called enantiodromia, which means that everything eventually turns into its opposite. The more you push something away, the more powerfully it returns. The more you try to be only good, only light, only spiritual, the more your shadow grows in darkness and power, and eventually it erupts. It has to, because the psyche demands wholeness, not perfection. The self wants integration, not exclusion. And your pineal gland, that seat of the soul, it's sitting there in the center of your brain, waiting for you to become whole enough to use it. It's not dormant because it's broken. It's dormant because you're not ready. Your personality structure can't handle the level of perception it would bring. You'd fragment, you'd break. The ego would shatter under the weight of that much truth. So the work Jung prescribes isn't meditation or breathing exercises or supplements, though those can support the process. The work is psychological. It's going into your own underworld and meeting the monsters there. It's recognizing that those monsters are you. They're the parts you cut off and buried because they didn't fit the story you wanted to tell about yourself. And when you stop running from them, when you turn and face them and ask what they need, what they're trying to tell you, something shifts. The energy that was bound up in the conflict between conscious and unconscious gets released, and it rises. It ascends through your being like mercury rising in a thermometer. And when it reaches the pineal gland, that ancient organ recognizes the frequency. It knows what's happening. You're becoming whole. You're becoming real. And it responds by opening the inner eye. This is why every authentic spiritual tradition includes some form of confrontation with darkness, the dark night of the soul, the descent into hell, the catabasis, the vision quest in the wilderness. You have to go down before you can go up. You have to die before you can be reborn. And in our modern spiritual marketplace, we've tried to skip this step. We want the awakening without the breaking. We want the activation without the annihilation. We want the third eye to open so we can see the pretty lights and the mystical visions. But we don't want to see the ugliness in ourselves. We don't want to confront our selfishness and our cruelty and our pettiness and our fear. But Jung is clear. There is no other way. The shadow must be integrated. The darkness must be embraced. Not indulged, not acted out, but felt, understood, accepted as part of your humanity. And when you do that, when you finally make peace with your own darkness, the light doesn't just enter your consciousness. It explodes. It floods every cell. It transforms your perception so completely that you understand why they call it awakening. Because you realize you've been asleep. You've been dreaming the dream of the separated self, the ego that believes it's alone in a hostile universe. And now you're waking up to the truth that was always there, the truth your pineal gland is designed to perceive. You are not separate. You are not alone. You are an expression of the divine having a human experience, and every shadow you've been afraid of is just another face of God. Jung said something in his later years that most people misunderstand. He said, "I don't believe in God, I know God." People thought he was being arrogant, claiming special knowledge. But he wasn't talking about belief or faith or doctrine. He was talking about direct perception. When the pineal gland activates through the individuation process, when the inner eye opens because you've become whole enough to use it, you don't believe in spiritual reality anymore. You perceive it, you experience it, you know it the way you know hunger or love or fear. It becomes a direct, undeniable fact of your existence. Not because someone told you it was true, not because you read it in a book or learned it in a teaching, but because you see it yourself, with your own inner vision. Through the eye that's been waiting in the center of your skull your entire life for you to become ready to open it. If you're feeling something shifting as you listen to this, if something inside you is recognizing the truth of what I'm saying, do me a favor. Hit that like button, because this message needs to reach more people. Too many seekers are stuck in the endless cycle of techniques and practices that go nowhere because they're avoiding the real work. And if you're not subscribed to this channel yet, subscribe now. We're building a community of people who are ready to do the real work of awakening, not the Instagram version, not the comfortable version, but the version that actually transforms you. That actually activates the dormant potentials buried in your psyche and your biology. This is the path Jung walked. This is the path the mystics have always walked, and you're invited to walk it too. Here's what happens when the pineal gland truly activates through psychological integration. You start dreaming differently. Not just more vividly, though that happens too, but your dreams become symbolic communications from the unconscious, messages from the self guiding you toward wholeness. Jung called dreams the natural reaction of the self-regulating psychic system, and when the pineal gland wakes up, you become fluent in the language of symbols. You understand that everything is speaking to you. The synchronicities multiply. You think of someone and they call. You need an answer and you open a book to exactly the right page. You ask the universe for a sign and it appears within hours. This isn't magic. It's not the universe bending to your will. It's your perception expanding to recognize patterns that were always there. The pineal gland, when functioning properly, perceives meaning. It sees connections. It reads the symbolic language that reality speaks beneath the surface of ordinary events. And suddenly your life stops feeling random. It feels purposeful, designed, like you're living inside a story that knows where it's going. You also start seeing through people's masks in ways that can be uncomfortable. When someone's pretending to be something they're not, you know. When someone's lying to themselves about their motivations, you see it. Not because you're judging them, but because you've done the work on yourself. You've faced your own pretenses and your own lies, so you recognize them in others. And this is where the loneliness comes in, the isolation that every awakened person feels. Because you can't unsee what you've seen. You can't go back to the comfortable illusions. You can't pretend the masks are real anymore. And most people around you are still deeply invested in their masks, their personas, their social games. They're not ready to be real. They're not ready to be seen. And you become threatening to them without meaning to be, because your presence reminds them of everything they're avoiding. But here's the beautiful paradox. The more alone you feel in this awakened state, the more connected you are to everything. Because the pineal gland doesn't just open your perception to psychological reality, it opens your perception to spiritual reality. You start feeling the presence of what Jung called the numinosum, the divine mystery that pervades existence. You feel held by something larger than yourself, guided by an intelligence that has your best interests at heart, even when life is painful. You understand that your suffering has meaning. Your struggles have purpose. Everything you've been through, all the darkness and confusion and pain, it was preparing you for this. It was initiating you into deeper levels of consciousness. It was activating your inner organs of perception so you could see what you're seeing now. This is what Jung meant when he talked about the religious function of the psyche. He didn't mean going to church or following a doctrine or believing in a particular god. He meant the direct experience of the sacred that emerges when the psyche becomes whole, when the conscious and unconscious unite, when the ego and the self align, when the pineal gland opens and you perceive the divine presence that's been there all along, hidden behind the veil of your psychological projections and defenses. God was never absent. You were just looking with the wrong eyes. You were using the physical eyes, the ego's eyes, the eyes that see separation and fear and scarcity. But when the third eye opens, you see with the soul's vision, and the soul sees only wholeness, only love, only the eternal dance of consciousness expressing itself through infinite forms. Jung spent his entire career trying to create a bridge between psychology and spirituality, between science and mysticism, because he understood they're not separate. The psyche is spiritual. Consciousness is sacred. And the tools we need to awaken aren't out there in some exotic practice or ancient technique. They're inside us. They're the natural functions of a fully developed human being. The pineal gland is designed to perceive spiritual reality the way your eyes are designed to perceive physical reality. But it only works when the psychological conditions are right, when you've done the inner work, when you've integrated the shadow, when you've stopped lying to yourself about who and what you are. And here's the really important part that most people miss. This isn't a one-time event. The pineal gland doesn't just activate once and then you're done, fully awakened for the rest of your life. It's a living organ responding to a living process. As you continue to grow, as you integrate deeper and deeper layers of the unconscious, as you face bigger and bigger shadows, the pineal gland activates more fully. Your inner vision becomes clearer. Your perception of meaning and purpose and spiritual reality becomes more direct. It's a spiral, not a straight line. You descend into darkness, you integrate what you find there, you ascend into light, and then you descend again into a deeper darkness to integrate even more. Each cycle opens the inner eye a little wider. Each integration releases more energy for spiritual perception. This is the path of individuation Jung mapped out. And he was very clear that it's not a path for everyone, not because some people aren't worthy, but because it requires tremendous courage and honesty and willingness to suffer. Most people would rather stay comfortable in their illusions than become uncomfortable in their truth. But you're here, you're listening to this, something in you is ready. Maybe you've been circling this work for years, reading books and watching videos and trying practices, always sensing there's something more, something deeper you're missing. And what you're missing is this. You're missing the willingness to go all the way down into your own darkness, to face the parts of yourself that terrify you, to admit the truths that would shatter your self-image, to die to who you think you are so you can be reborn as who you actually are. And when you do that, when you finally take that leap into the unknown depths of your own psyche, the pineal gland doesn't just activate. It awakens to its true function as the organ of spiritual perception, the translator between dimensions, the seat of the soul, the inner eye that sees the divine presence in everything, including you. So stop looking for the magic pill or the secret technique or the perfect practice that's going to open your third eye while you sleep. It doesn't exist. What exists is the hard, beautiful, terrifying work of becoming whole, of integrating your shadow, of confronting your lies, of feeling your pain, of admitting your truth. And on the other side of that work, not as a reward, but as a natural consequence, your inner vision opens. The pineal gland activates not because you forced it, but because you finally became ready. You finally created the psychological conditions for it to function the way it was always designed to function. And then you see, really see, and you know, really know, and your life transforms not because your circumstances change, but because you change. You become the awakened one, the one who sees clearly, the one who knows the divine presence intimately, The one Jung was describing when he said, "I don't believe in God, I know God," that knowing is your birthright, that vision is your inheritance, that awakening is your destiny. And it's waiting for you in the center of your skull, in the darkness behind your eyes, in the seat of your soul. All you have to do is become brave enough to claim it.